Good afternoon, everybody. Um, Welcome to another video here from Austin, Texas. I wanted to kind of just show y'all one of my other favorite plants. It's in the same family as the elephant ear. Some people also call them elephant ears, and they do, have a similar structure of like resembling an elephant ear, I suppose. But they also kind of go by other common names. These I've heard called arrowheads. I've also heard them called goosefoot. I have another here that, and I'm getting an appearance from Lucky Cat. I was wondering when you guys were going to meet her, guys and gals and all the other identities in between. But while she introduces herself, I wanted to also introduce a caladium that, they aren't usually commonly called caladiums, but one of my neighbors came through and was like, "Oh, I love your elephant ear," and I was like, "Oh, well, thank you. I'm not gonna, be super specific, because again, they are in the same family. They're in the Araceae family, which generally means they have like an inflorescence, which you could actually notice on the alocasia that was sitting over here on this side of my previous video. You can notice in the center there was actually a little spadix, or an old one, that had come up, and that's actually where the flowers come up. It's an inflorescence that is like a cluster of flowers, and it is really interesting. It's almost like shielded, like it's like a little cup, and then like in the middle it's like the little flower. And it kind of matches like on that caladium I just showed you. It'll be like a white and green spadix and little flowers. Like, it's pretty cool. But yeah, these are literally maybe even more so than the elephant ears that I was showing y'all yesterday. These are literally my most no-fuss plants, at least once you get them in the right growing condition. So for me, here in Central Texas, technically in a growing zone 8B, which really just means that my temperature minimum, or the usual lowest temperature that I get here is about 15 to 25 degrees Fahrenheit. And generally they say that Syngonium podophyllums, here these arrowheads, are generally in zone 10 through 12, with the caladiums that I was showing y'all being in zones, I think it's 9 through 11. So these guys generally, pretty much a hard line actually, don't really want to go below freezing. But I will tell you, since I'm growing them here on the patio, and I've had them in somewhat like front doorway conditions and previous houses, they can tolerate a little bit of cold as long as they have a little bit of like wind protection. Even in pots like this, they'll still kind of do fine, as long as it's not like a very long drop in the temperature. Because some of these, you can see how many leaves and how much foliage grow out from here, and it's kind of very almost bushy once you get it in really good conditions. And it does start to trail too, but it kind of stays as a bush and then it kind of trails, for at least this specific type that I have. So it kind of grows really bushy, and even if it does kind of drop in temperature, you might get a couple of the outer ones that might kind of freeze off or get some cold damage. It really might be some of the only things. Like, you might not even lose the whole leaf. You might just get like some brown spots. That's kind of like a burn or just cold damage from the frost. But the core of the plant will still be, growing strong, and will probably survive. I've actually, even if I did kind of get lazy and leave these on my patio during a little cold spell, I've never had these completely die out on me. So that's really nice, at least as far as the Syngonium. As for the Caladium, they're kind of one of my more prized, I guess, elephant ear Araceae family. So if there is ever a cold snap, plus it's a smaller plant, I always bring my Caladium inside, because I just think it's gorgeous. If I could rag on about these Caladiums and kind of try to get a leaf in better frame, you can see just how colorful it is, and you can almost kind of see, it's kind of hard for it to pick up on camera in certain angles, but there is like kind of pink blushy spots There's some in this leaf that I could try to maybe show you on camera. But if you kind of almost give it really optimal conditions slash maybe kind of stress it out a little bit, you'll kind of notice that this caladium in particular, it's called the White Christmas variety. While the package only shows it as like a green and white caladium, if you, like I said, get it in good conditions and maybe even give it just a little bit of extra sun, it'll kind of like blush, which I think is really pretty. I have some pictures on my Instagram of trying to capture that. So yeah, I just really like these plants because they're the most low fuss I've had and the most incredibly versatile plants that I've ever had. I have neglected these, and they have just thrived and just look so impressive. Like, I can't even stress enough. I haven't done anything to this probably pretty much all year, and this is just such an impressive specimen to me. And it weirdly makes me feel really proud, even though I don't do anything. Like, I just sit back, watch it grow. For me, like I said, it's on my patio. It's underneath a crepe myrtle tree that provides, excellent shade from the harsh afternoon Texas sun. And then, of course, the fenced-in patio itself protects from the really harsh evening sun. So this really only gets some morning sun and then some very dappled like afternoon sun, anything that might pass through the crepe myrtle. What's I think is also making it even more happy, and I'm gonna try to maybe lift it a little bit and show it on camera, but these Syngoniums, these arrowheads, can grow crazy aerial roots compared to some of their other Araceae kind of family members. So if I turn this a little bit, and it's already starting to poke out here, let me get my orientation. You could already see that these are some aerial roots over here. And so these, I mean, even if they're in the air and they're not like completely submerged in any kind of medium, will help kind of draw in some of the moisture from the air and the humidity. And this plant is just now so spoiled because I finally got around to getting the little fountain that I have running just for like ambiance and noise from nearby neighbors and stuff like that, and provide humidity. I moved it from my sunny location to my shady location, so now all my shady plants, which were humidity-loving plants anyways, are just, growing crazy. This guy is so happy, or girl, whatever it is very happy. It is, trailing over here on this side, like it's got, if I can maybe move this and kind of try to lift this, if I turn this, you'll see that there's like a whole, just like other plant. If I was to able to, you see, like if I was to just chop this off right here, where kind of like my pointer finger is, this is like a whole other plant that you could either just put directly into soil, because it already has some of these aerial roots that are just, ready to be potted up, or you could, if you wanted, does very well with water propagation. The only thing with water propagating, I would say, as beautiful it is to, like, let's say if you get like a clear glass or something and you put something like this to water propagate, it's super fun, I think, and encouraging to be able to see the root growth, because you will see the roots grow very noticeably. But water roots, they say, are different than the roots that grow like in the soil. I think they say that soil roots are a little bit tougher. You'll be able to notice, like I've kind of, observed over the years, I've put some that used to have dirt roots into like a nice little vase or something, and then you can see the water roots start growing, and they're just a little bit thinner. They're a little bit different in looking in structure, just integrity. So if you were to water propagate something like this, or really any plant in general, from water propagation in preparation to put it in soil, you don't want to let it go too long, because the shock from having, adapted some water roots and all that kind of stuff, and then having to change it up and have to start growing these like roots in soil. I'm not exactly sure prolonging the water propagation is really going to actually help. It might actually hinder the transition from water to soil. But I've never really had any problems. These guys are super easy. Like the first time I ever repotted this, again, this is one of my plants that came from my mother. So when I finally got around post-college to like repotting it, she gave it to me in like this little pitcher. And so like a lemonade pitcher. It was actually very adorable. I still have it. I broke it down, and I didn't know what to do with the babies, because this was like one of the first plants I had ever like grabbed and broken down, and it was so root bound in that little pitcher, but it was still thriving. It was so root bound, and there were babies and all that kind of stuff, and I just had no idea what to do. And my roommate was just like, you know, if you put that in soil, it's gonna grow. And I'm just like, are you serious? Because there was like a little node, which that's what that is. You know, when I was pointing out earlier, they could, you know, where these little roots, these little aerial roots kind of start to grow out, they call those nodes. So if you were to, you know, if I was to take the stem or any one of these like little stems and see where there's aerial roots, you'll notice, you know, there's little nodes, and each of those nodes, if you plant it in soil or water propagate it, that's just a whole new plant for you. So I kind of a similar story, for this as the previous elephant ears. Is I had kind of potted these up and was offering, it was actually in the same batch as the previous elephant ears when I took them to work, and had kind of spruced everything up. And instead of asking people, I was kind of like, I guess, enticing them by showing, you know, how they could spruce up a place, and just bringing them in person already, so they have, I don't know, just no excuses to not take it if they wanted it or what have you, and just kind of see for themselves firsthand. And so a lot of people were calling these elephant ears, even at the office. So I thought that was kind of funny, and not to be I wasn't to be a stickler then, but because I was more familiar than like with my coworkers than like my neighbor, I was like, oh, I generally call these arrowheads just to distinguish, because when some of my coworkers were asking me, hey, can I get that little elephant ear from you? Like, I think that's really cool. My wife wants one. I was like, the little elephant ear? Like, do you mean the, like, you know, kind of variegated, white splotched one? And he's like, oh, yeah. And I was like, oh, cool, yeah, I call that an arrowhead. And it's not even to be a stickler, it's just to know what people are talking about, right? So that's, in the same vein, that's why I sometimes try to, my best, you know, to discern and distinguish, and just kind of look up what genus and species, if possible, my plants are, because it just, you know, helps talk about them even like globally, to know like their like Latin name, and just be able to look up their specific growing structures, because flowers in the same genus but different species could still have rather different, surprisingly different growing habits, but that's not always the case. So I did bring up like the color in this plant, and you can see how, you know, it has some white variegation to it. There are different varieties of this. My mom did find me the pink princess, or I don't know, there's one of the, you know, there's a couple of different pink varieties. Unfortunately, I had left it out in the sun one like a hot Texas summer day last summer, and was not able to recuperate it. Like the leaves, it already only had like a couple leaves when I got it from my mother, because it was like a propagation, and I was like watering one day and totally left it out in the sun. But anyways, for variegated plants in general like these, if you want the variegation to be rather noticeable, you could put it in the sun, and this would kind of come out a little bit more white. It would kind of be a little bit more white overall in color from my experience on this plant, as opposed to like, you know, the green staying green and the white staying whiter. This one, in my experience, it kind of gets an overall more slightly bleached effect, which also happens in plants even if they're not variegated. If you're giving a plant too much sun and you're noticing it's like bleaching, it's because the sun is bleaching it. So keep that in mind. There's a balance between kind of, you know, getting a good amount of sun so you can appreciate its variegation and kind of bring that out, or just any kind of coloration in a plant, and then, you know, with the balance of not wanting to burn your plant. So yeah, I also have another example, just real quick to bring it into frame, of kind of a somewhat smaller and decorative arrowhead specimen that I had, which is a little bit windblown from the storm, from a little tropical storm that we had, having blown in Texas. But this one last year, and as you can see, it's trailing, and this is actually a really good example for me to bring into camera and show you some of these aerial nodes here, aerial roots. And then I can even, zoom in and show you that, these are kind of what the nodes look like. You can kind of see, it's almost like a little ridge, and you'll notice that, there are some aerial roots coming from it. But this one last year had done really, really well in my patio, and it had actually kind of, I think out of all my arrowheads, was the one kind of getting the most sun. And so it had stayed bushy here, kind of like it is now, but a little bit more well kept. And then it had actually trailed 3 vines from the side of the pot, and I had to just kind of like let it, I guess, define or hug the little layout of my outdoor patio furniture, and I thought it was really nice. And then some of them, the vines along the ground, found little patches of soil and were trying to get their aerial roots to grow a little stronger, kind of like this one. But yeah, I just wanted to show y'all another family member, I suppose, of the Araceae family. Something that's grown in similar conditions, something that can be rather hands-off. I will say that Caladiums are not as hands-off as these Syngoniums. You can kind of tell that this one had gotten some, like a little caterpillar damage from some of the caterpillars we had gotten this season. But these Caladiums like to stay consistently moist. I actually have this one in kind of lighter, more aerated and well-draining soil, so that just because I have a little hunch, because last year I kind of grew it in compact soil, and at the end of the season when I came to dig up the bulbs, since this one will die out in like the fall, winter, once the sun starts, to be less strong in the day and as, out and about for as long, it does start to die back, and you can just, harvest the bulb or keep them in ground if it's not going to get too cold in your area. But you could like harvest it and, see if it might have pushed out any baby bulbs for you to harvest as well. But some of my trials of last year, in the soil that I had that I felt was just too compact, the roots were not that, they didn't go down that deep. And it was just hard for me to like keep it consistently watered or routinely watered, but also well drained, so that the roots can have some aeration, which is good for the roots. Roots don't generally like to be just logged in water, which is why it is sometimes nice to also use a terracotta pot if you do have heavier soil, or just are kind of a gardener who's able to be a little bit more on top of their plants. Terracotta is really nice for the roots to be able to breathe, and for the soil to dry out in between waterings, just so that you don't like grow mold in the soil, and so that the roots, like I said, can breathe and grow, have just like a healthy balance of good watering plus aeration and such. That is a little bit of a different case with this one. This one, I'm pretty sure is actually the same one that last summer when we did get, I did get some of that new patio furniture that I have outside. It kind of hid a couple plants from me because there was like a wall of furniture. I mean, it's modular, but we had set it up so that there's like a little wall of seats from some of the furniture set. And so this one was hiding behind it, and it was so dense like it is now that I guess we had some rain, like a good heavy bout of rain, and for the longest time apparently it was just waterlogged, because at that point I still have like these plastic, I guess they're plastic, little little pots from just your general like hardware store and stuff. Often come with like a little bottom, a removable bottom base that you can leave on there if you want the water to not drain or you could, take it out if you want the water to drain more efficiently. And so I had left that on, or connected, and so the water was just like completely to the top pretty much, and it was just completely logged for what I would assume was a very long time, because it hadn't rained. There was a bout of rain, but I had noticed a long time afterwards, and it was thriving more than all of my other ones that I did, that didn't have like a connected bottom, that had well-draining pots and soil that I was actually keeping on top of watering. This one was growing just like it was growing a shoot over here, like a trail of a little vine, and it was just so bushy. So I had actually, like I said, offered a lot of my coworkers this, and they had done their own really cool plantings with this. One of them had used like a pot that, I don't know if it was made out of an old tree stump or just resembled one, but they had put it in there, anticipating it to bush out and then eventually start trailing, which I think will eventually look really cool. One of my neighbors, who I had offered a lot of my plants to, because they were propagations of some other plants that I had, like cannas and arrowheads like this and coleus, he had gotten one of my other big just specimens of arrowheads, and he had actually put a tomato cage on top of it so that the trails, like the vines that would eventually start growing, would kind of stay compact but would grow up it, which I always thought would be really cool. I heard if you put a moss pole on these, for it to kind of climb up, the leaves will, of course, like most plants, will get bigger. Like I would love to do that with a pothos and such in the future. But anyways, before I start rambling about other plants, I just wanted to wrap this up, tell y'all about this cool, very, very versatile, very, very hardy, and just almost indestructible, even in the somewhat cold bouts, and dry spells, and even wet spells. And if you want to kind of challenge yourself with something in the same family, feel free to pick up some Caladium bulbs. They're very easy to grow from bulbs, or you can grow by the little babies as well in the plant center. They have the this kind of variation. They have some that have pink and reds, all sorts of colors, and they're very beautiful. Some of them are more tolerant to full sun situations as opposed to being a little bit more delicate. So yeah, I hope y'all have a good evening, and thanks for watching.